When it comes to the elected leadership of the Democrat Party, they are definitely not sending their best and brightest. And in many cases, they actually don't even have a fundamental understanding of the rule of law in this country. And this, of course, we're going to see called out by Michael Knowles over on Piers Morgan show, where we have Representative Democrat Shri Thanedar, who has zero clue what insurrection actually is. But before we get to these clips, don't forget to like, share, comment, subscribe on this video so we can break through the algorithms. Here we go.
There are some sort of fundamental principles at play here in various things this administration is doing. One of which is about the ability of the federal government to deploy federal troops into states that are not Washington, D.C. The question, Michael, do you feel comfortable this is constitutional?
Not only do I feel comfortable, I'm happy to see that the federal government is stepping in where the local and state governments have failed. This is one of the main things that the federal government is for. The Insurrection Act has been invoked many times throughout American history by both parties. Eisenhower, Kennedy, it's been called in by, it's been requested rather by Democrat governors. And so that's really unsurprising. And what we're looking at here is issue compounding on issue, because we've had this massive invasion of foreign nationals, many of whom are working with foreign terrorist organizations, the criminal cartels that control the southern border. We have crime spiraling out of control generally in places like Chicago, which in terms of the number of murders leads the country, something like 110,000 gang members in Chicago alone. And you're seeing an uptick in political violence, particularly from the left. So you're having a lot of disorder. This is why we have the Insurrection Act. It's why we have the federal government, because I think people are debating between these two false options. Either we can all sit together and sing Kumbaya and nobody can enforce the law, or we're going to have violence. But that's not really the case. The two options you have are you can have just, prudent state violence, that is to say cops enforcing the law and putting the bad guys in jail, or you can have what you're seeing increasingly celebrated by the left, which is vigilante violence, which is unjust. And I want the just kind. I want an orderly society, and I don't think we should just consign people who happen to live in failed blue cities to misery and murder and all the rest of it.
Okay, Shri Thanedar, your response to that?
Well, look, militarization of our cities is not the answer. It's not only not legal, it's not only unconstitutional, but more importantly, it's not even good business, because this costs so much putting federal troops in cities. Instead of that, if federal government can give the grants so that local police law enforcement can hire more people. Right now, they are severely understaffed. They don't have the resources they need to keep our cities safe. Now, in a long-term process... But
aren't you answering your question? I mean, aren't you
I think you're making the point.
Right. I mean, in a way, what you just said is the rationale for doing it, isn't it? I mean, they're under-resourced. No. They don't have enough people. They can't control the crime. Donald Trump is recognizing this, and he's doing something about it. Why would you object to seeing some troops on the streets to just try and restore order and perhaps send a real message to criminals?
See, putting military and reserves all over America, major American cities, and militarization of our country is not the solution. The solution is empower the local law enforcement, give them the funds that they need. It's the funding that needs to come so we can have a more long-term, long-lasting solution to it.
Congressman, are you familiar with the Insurrection Act?
Yes, I am. Yes, I am.
And this so what do you think that's for? You said that this was illegal. You said it was not unconstitutional and illegal for the federal government to send National Guard into cities and states. What do you think the Insurrection Act is for?
Well, look, this is a issue that the local government should be handling. It is this
no,
is an issue.
But what is the answer to
I don't think you understand the insurrection.
Right, so to Michael's. Well, let me just ask. I mean, Congressman, do you actually know what the Insurrection Act says?
Yes, you know, but this is the.
Hang on. What does it say?
Well, look, what we saw happen in January 6th in the Congress. That's insurrection.
No, that's not the question. The question is, are you familiar? Obviously, the government is citing the Insurrection Act as the empowerment to do what it's doing. Are you familiar with what the Insurrection Act allows?
Yes, I am. But look, this president has used all kinds of excuses to break the law. This precedent has
No,
used...
but that is the law. So what is the law, Congressman? You say you're familiar with the Insurrection Act, but you don't seem to be able to describe what it does, and you're actually contradicting it. So what do you think the Insurrection Act does?
Look, the issue here is that we need our cities safe. Americans want...
Well, Congressman, with all due respect, that's not an answer to the question. Just to be clear, Congressman, it's a pretty simple question that Michael posed, which is the government are citing the Insurrection Act as the rationale and the legal tool by which they can do what they're doing. You said it's illegal and wrong and they shouldn't be doing it, but you seem to be struggling to explain what the Insurrection Act actually is. And Michael, quite rightly, is saying, well, can you just tell us?
Well, whatever it is, when the National Guards are picking up trash and the National Guards are watering the flowers, that is not Insurrection Act, and that's not what this is meant to be.
But do you know what it is, the act?
Yeah.
What is it?
When there is an insurrection, the government has powers to use military, use reserve to address those situations. And this is clearly not the situation here. What we need to do is empower local law enforcement.
Okay, Michael, your response to that?
I think the congressman might be a little bit confused because he said that the federal government is breaking the law by sending the National Guard in to restore order to the cities where crime has spiraled out of control, where there's obviously a violation of federal law with all of the illegal aliens running about. And that is actually what it's for. We have a federal government in order to step in when the local and state governments fail. And so this has been used many, many times, not merely to restore order if there's some violent revolution, but even, for instance, to desegregate schools. This has been used many, many times over the course of American history. There's nothing illegal about it. And in fact, what President Trump is doing right now is one of the clearest and most just uses of the Insurrection Act when you have cities that are failing, that in your own words, cannot enforce the law, are under-resourced, and are falling into disorder. So I think you've made a good argument for what President Trump is doing.
So clearly, Shri Thanedar had zero clue what the Insurrection Act actually is. Okay, and he's trying to cover his butt by saying, January 6th, that's an insurrection, right? Okay, so no clue whatsoever. But the first thing I want to talk about is Michael Knowles makes the point that you actually have a legitimate function of government. And that, of course, is to protect the people. And that, of course, is why we have a standing military. Okay. But then we have to get to the question of what exactly is the Insurrection Act. And all you have to do is come over to Title 10 of the U.S. Code, Section 333. The president, by using the militia or the armed forces or both, or by any other means, shall take such measures as he considers necessary to suppress in a state any insurrection, domestic violence, unlawful combination, or conspiracy, if it, part 1, so hinders the execution of the laws of that state and of the United States within the states, that any part or class of its people is deprived of a right, privilege, immunity, or protection named in the Constitution and secured by law. And then part 2, opposes or obstructs the execution of the laws of the United States or impedes the course of justice under those laws. So what exactly is happening with Donald Trump, of course, sending in the National Guard? ICE was not allowed to function normally. All of these places in California and Oregon and DC, right, they were not allowing ICE to go in and do the deportations. They were actually allowing people to come out and violently protest them and hindering them from doing their federal duty. So what does Donald Trump do? Invokes the Insurrection Act and sends in the National Guard, which of course he is legally allowed to do, which has been upheld in several different courts. So obviously this is the solution for states who are, of course, refusing to enforce federal law. But notice here it also says hinders the execution of the laws of that state. So in places like Chicago, where you actually have criminals allowed to run rampant, is there a role there for the National Guard? And I'd say yes, in terms of helping the actual law enforcement of that city or state, which of course is something that places like Chicago and Los Angeles and Portland should be embracing. But of course, they're so dead set against Donald Trump that they will actually hinder the enforcement of the rule of law in in this nation, no matter who it affects, no matter how many people are harmed, because of course, the Democrats only care about the criminals, as I've said over and over again. However, let's go ahead and get back to Shri Thanedar, okay? He's over here making the point that, well, it costs a lot, right? This isn't really a good economic decision because apparently mobilizing the National Guard costs a lot of money. Well, guess what else costs a lot of money, right? Actually sending police out to enforce the law, right? Paying prosecutors to go out there and prosecute criminals. And then, of course, putting people in jail. The whole point is it goes back to what's the legitimate function of government. And that, of course, is to protect the public. And how do you do that? You have to spend money on law enforcement, on criminal prosecution, on criminal incarceration, right? That's how you protect the public. But of course, this is an idea that the Democrats and the left have long since abandoned. But of course, Shri is still trying to make the point that, you know what, we have to empower local law enforcement, right? What do you think we're doing? Who have been the ones depowering them? Who have been the ones defunding them, right? It has been the leftist cities and states. They've been the ones actually trying to get rid of law enforcement by allowing criminality to go completely crazy. But Shri just says, please give them more money, because apparently that's going to solve all of the problems of them not enforcing the laws in the first place, which of course is the conundrum we happen to be facing. So yes, Michael Knowles makes a great point. Shri has been caught with his pants down, and he doesn't even know what the basic laws are that he's advocating against. But either way, this was wonderful to see someone completely inept and so far on the left in the Democrat Party that he has no clue as to what's actually happening on the ground in a lot of these cities. So thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to like, share, comment, subscribe, and say hi to your mom for me. Do you like t-shirts? Of course you do. And now you can support the channel by buying an Angry Teacher t-shirt designed by me, Angry Teacher. So if you like America, if you like freedom, if you like liberty, then go ahead and click the link in the description, where all designs, of course, are 100% mother approved. So enjoy yourself and find something you like today.